Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name's George.
My name's Oscar. So this week's quote
Brilliant
is
start, mate.
yeah, do that a lot.
We'll edit that out. Don't worry, guys.
This week's quote: "We don't like to admit it, but the idea of losing control is one that fascinates controlled people such as ourselves more than almost anything." That's from The Secret History by Donna Tartt.
In this episode, we got into some stories from my childhood of me freaking out at age 6, Oscar getting rocks thrown at him in Prague, feeling insecure about not being able to let go, also the fear of losing control, and also having faith that things are going to be okay. All right, let's get into the episode. Enjoy. What's up, bro?
Yeah, I'm just subdued. Feel a bit subdued.
Yeah,
I'm hoping that this topic will be exciting enough to get me out of my funk.
Oh yeah, mate, you're on to the hard stuff. Whenever you're ready to kick it off, then go for it.
Sweet. So we don't like to admit it, but the idea of losing control is one that fascinates controlled people such as ourselves more than almost anything. And this is from a book called The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So I'm reading this book at the moment. I'm rereading it. I love Donna Tartt's writing. She wrote another book called 𝗢𝗀𝗿, which is probably my favorite book, one of my favorite books anyway. As we often do, I kind of want to put this quote in a bit of context. So I'm actually going to read a longer section from the book. "The Greeks were different. They had a passion for order and symmetry, much like the Romans, but they knew how foolish it would be to deny the unseen world, the old gods, emotion, darkness, barbarism." He looked at the ceiling for a moment, his face almost troubled. "Do you remember what we were speaking of earlier, of how bloody, terrible things are sometimes the most beautiful?" he said. "It's a very Greek idea, and a very profound one. Beauty is terror. Whatever we call beautiful, we quiver before it. And what could be more terrifying and beautiful to souls like the Greeks or to our own than to lose control completely, to throw off the chains of being for an instant, to shatter the accident of our mortal selves, head thrown back, throat to the stars, more like a deer than a human being, to be absolutely free. One is quite capable, of course, of working these destructive patterns in more vulgar and less efficient ways, but how glorious to release them in a single burst, to sing, to scream, to dance barefoot in the woods, in the dead of night, with no more awareness of mortality than an animal. These are powerful mysteries, the bellowing of bulls, springs of honey bubbling from the ground. If we are strong enough in our souls, we can rip away the veil and look that naked, terrible beauty right in the face. Let God consume us, devour us, unstring our bones, and spit us out reborn. Read that initially, it just totally blew me away. It's just very powerfully written, and it's the same section of the book as the quote that I've picked for this week. I think it captures that kind of energy of wildness and lack of control that I wanted to bring to this episode. One of the main reasons why I wanted to bring up control is I feel both you and me are quite controlled people. We consider everything that we do. That's my impression of you, and that's what I know of myself as well. I think we think a lot about consequence. So I was interested in exploring if this quote is true on one level. Is it something that feels fascinating and intriguing, this idea of losing control? Is it something that we feel connected to, that we feel like we understand, or is it quite an abstract thing? I've always considered myself quite a control person, and I have spent quite a lot of my teen years really envying those people that seem to just be able to let go completely and not have to think about consequence, and almost trying to emulate that, but not being able to do it because it's not something that you can do in that way. And so then becoming more at ease with myself as I am, and then trying to introduce this idea of lack of control or spontaneity and wildness into my life with the kind of person that I am. Those are my initial ideas of what we could potentially explore in this episode. And I'm really curious about what your thoughts were, because this quote feels quite different.
So I looked up the definitions for the words, and the definition of controlled is not showing emotion and having one's feelings under control. So interestingly, there's quite a different definition for controlled and control. So the definition for control is the power to influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. So that's your ability to change the world, to have influence on the world, to have an ability to have food, shelter, all of those things that you want. And well, actually, I'd like to tell a little story about me losing control, because I think it's quite an important moment in my life. So this was when I was about 6 years old. I was in the playground near our house, and I was just having fun, playing around. And there was another kid there. I don't remember exactly what it was he was doing, but I was just getting really frustrated with this kid. I just remember getting angry, and the fact that I just snapped. I think I must have pushed him or something like that. And I remember afterwards talking to my mum about it and her asking me why I did that. I remember I just thought it was like the Hulk, because it was something that really scared me. It was like something came over me and I had no control over my actions. And that scared me, because there can be really bad consequences of losing control. That's what brought it back to those two definitions, being controlled and having control. And at a young age, I had this realization that if I'm not controlled in how I behave, then I will lose control of my environment. So through me just acting wild and pushing some kid or doing something like that meant that, say, maybe other kids wouldn't want to play with me. You could be abandoned, or you could lose love. You won't have the love and affection if you're not able to control yourself. I wanted to be in control, but also without being controlled, because I would have liked to not have to hide that part of myself. But these two things are in conflict. You can't just go around behaving however you like and not thinking about any consequences and expect yourself to remain in control, because someone's going to wrestle control from you. If you're doing something unreasonable, someone might, attack you back. You're going to face consequences if you're just behaving like a dick and cutting cues and doing all sorts of dumb shit. So I think that moment was like Carl Jung, who talks about the shadow side. That was a moment where there's a split, because you have the socially acceptable part of yourself, which is the one that goes along with the rules and plays fair. And there's the part of yourself that just wants to attack because you're angry and someone's made you feel bad. And it's a good thing that that is not acceptable, because you do need to manage that part of yourself. That's the level of society and culture. But it's a common problem that people repress that part of themselves and completely deny its existence. And that is what can be really dangerous. That we've ended up talking in the last few podcasts, actually, about the shadow sides of things. So yeah, recently a lot of what I've been trying to do is to integrate that more. So say finding which areas of control I can let go of? Where can I actually care less about what people think and not try and control and manage my emotions? And where are times where I just need to? And perhaps there are other ways I can express those emotions rather than what happened as a kid, which was just a blanket, all losing control is bad. For example, through training jiu-jitsu, that's a great way that I can express myself aggressively. And that part of me can be quelled. Through dealing with that, I feel much more relaxed in my daily life because I'm just letting out the steam.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you started with a story of when it kind of backfired, that letting go, just totally acting impulsively or completely spontaneously actually led to some bad consequences. Even though you were 6, you're still remembering now vividly as being an important moment. It had an effect on how you saw that side of yourself even then. It's interesting to think of what you might have been like had that moment not happened, or if it was maybe inevitable that you would have a recognition like that. I'm kind of intrigued by exploring the darker sides first, since you brought that up, because I think I've had a similar sense of that it's dangerous to be out of control, to lose control. And I think what can happen is you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You say, because it's dangerous, I must therefore always be in control. I must always think of consequence and anticipate what's going to happen. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, me and a friend of mine, we went to a party just outside of Brighton in the countryside, and it was a wooded area and people had massive speakers. It was my friend's thing, so I didn't really know anyone there. We just decided to go because we thought it'd be fun. We ended up having a really, really fun night, just dancing, and someone made a little fire and we were just sitting around and chatting, and it was just really, really nice. It was a really long party, and as the sun started to come up, it was decided that we would move our bags and everything further into the woods as the sun came up, because we were starting to have dog walkers past. We were getting weird looks basically, and these guys who had been sitting down, they'd been sitting down all night, and I hadn't paid all that much attention to them other than they were doing drugs. Every half hour or something, they were doing these enormous lines of ketamine, just ridiculous amounts of it basically. And they hadn't got up all night. The sun was starting to come up and we were starting to feel a little bit like, all right, let's move on from here. They're trying to stand up, and as they stand up, then they're just falling over, right? But they start just falling face first into nettles, and me and my friend try and give them a hand and just help them to walk because they're so off their head. And one of them starts getting quite aggressive. He's very disorientated and confused by this whole situation, and he doesn't know what's happening. So he's obviously very distressed. And for anyone that doesn't know, ketamine's a tranquilizer. So he obviously was kind of unable to really express himself, but he didn't understand that we were trying to help him. And he was trying to refuse our help, but it was this thing of he just kept on falling over. And I just became more and more distressed by this situation because it was very much someone who was completely out of reach, out of control and out of reach. We were really trying to help this person because they had gone really overboard, but he just couldn't compute or understand what we were doing. Maybe similar to how you were describing your own actions and feeling a fear at age 6 of what had happened and that you'd been taken over. In this case, for me, it was like, I don't know how to reach this person. I have no way of contacting this person at this point. And they're obviously very distressed and I don't know how to help and I don't know what to do about it. And that really scared me a lot. And I think that taps into, this darker side of lack of control, which is when communicating with someone like that, then you just don't know how you're supposed to connect anymore. And it's at that point, it becomes that aspect of real danger. That is enough of a reason for me to have shied away from exploring it more in my own life, or having a general fear of it, is I just don't know what's going to happen, and it could be quite bad. And then these things in my life have like been examples of potentially that happening.
So it was like you couldn't communicate with the person, or the normal part of someone that you can communicate, that buys into the same ideas or the same reality as you. You couldn't relate to them on that level. It was like they was just animal almost.
Yeah, that was it. And the way that I feel I can gauge whether or not a situation is threatening or not is that bouncing back of communication and having some sort of shared way of communicating. And whether that's just body language or even eye contact, even if you're abroad or whatever, you can still communicate a lot through just facial signals, eye contact, body language and stuff. But in this case, that felt all severed. That link just really wasn't there at all. And I find that I really need that.
Are there times when you have felt out of control?
Yeah, there's another thing that it was a really weird situation a few years ago, going to Prague with our friends Jamie and Miles and OJ, and we were drinking a lot in Prague, and I think that kind of scrambled my brain a little bit. There was a point where it was a really odd situation. We were outside this club and these guys just started throwing rocks at people. And I was like pretty drunk, but I don't even think it was that. I think it was just that we had been drinking it was like kind of our attempt at a lad's holiday, but I don't think any of us are actually made for that kind of holiday. I don't think we could handle the amount that you're expected to drink on those kinds of things. So I think we were all just becoming a bit, maybe lads are just like this, I don't know, on these lads holidays, but I was like very disorientated in the day as well. It was a very odd holiday anyway. And we were outside this clubs, and these guys started throwing rocks at us and at other people. God knows why. And I just got overtaken by this kind of wild, I don't even know if it was anger, but it was just like super inflation of just thinking, fuck these guys. It was a very energetic thing of just being overtaken by this confidence in that I had to stop this from happening. I was just like, I'm kind of invincible in this situation. I don't know why I thought that, but basically just started shouting back, and it resulted in me running down the road and all of these guys running away. I had so much internal backup that my energy would push these people back, that they must have believed it. I don't know what would have happened if they turned around, because there was loads of them and I'm not a big person and I don't know how to fight either. I was overtaken by something and it was very bizarre. And I definitely remember the next day and in hindsight being quite afraid of that. It was because it was so unexpected as a situation that I would act in that way. Because if they had turned around, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, I probably would have tried to fight them, but I would have probably lost as well. Then I would be really injured. You know, there was no decision-making process in that at all. I just was completely overtaken by a sort of righteous anger or something that basically was, this is wrong. This situation is wrong. And I'm going to stop it from happening. And it was a very, very bizarre thing. But I think that was also scary looking back, because that went okay. You know, that went well. But it definitely didn't feel like I was involved in that at all. You know? Yeah.
Wow. No, I hadn't heard that story, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You chasing off a big group of people throwing rocks.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what we were talking in our episode about bravery. Just to briefly sum it up, we talked about the different levels of fight or flight, and how a lot of people, when they're in a dangerous situation, perhaps their first resort is to get away or to avoid it. But generally speaking, the more dangerous and serious the situation is, the more likely you are to fight rather than flight. It seems like that's what happened, that you realize this is a dangerous situation, or something about you meant that you went into the automatic part of you, which is fight. And that's, it's exactly the same thing that happened with the stalker that I had.
Yeah.
Like I had a sudden moment, which you have to go back and listen to the episode. Do you remember what number it was?
It's going to be like 4 or 3 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, it's the episode we did on bravery. And that moment where I just realized he was still following me and turned around, just angrily went straight towards his car to go to his window. And I was ready to smash in his window, do like whatever. And it was something that surprised me as well. When you're acting from a part of you that isn't controlled by your social layer of intelligence, that's not there, or not in the same way. It's just things that happen as a reaction without you going, oh, let me think about this, and I should probably do this. There's no premeditation. It's just something that happens. But I think it is really important to understand that that's a really valuable part of yourself and that you don't want to get rid of it, because that's something that can really help you in a dangerous situation.
It's something way, way back in our evolution that's been there such a long time and very, very unfamiliar. So my experience and what you said about the Hulk as a child, I think it is scary because it doesn't have the flavor of your sense of self or identity at all. In Game of Thrones, they have the skin changers, people who can go into the bodies of animals and things like that. So if I was a skin changer, I could go into the body of a cat and walk around as a cat. And it happens to people as well. But if that happens to a person, the person really resists that happening because it's terrifying having someone overtake your awareness. And I think it's the same thing. It's something, in this case, very primal and animalistic. As was mentioned in the longer version of the quote that I read at the beginning, morality and things don't come into it. It's not like you're considering a number of options and you're taking an action based on what you think is right necessarily. You are taken over and it is something out of your control, which for, I think, people that live very much of their life feeling quite regulated and like they know what they're doing is particularly unnerving. I've got another little story for this one. So we've just been at a really nice little dinner party thing at my mum's friend's house, and everyone else had gone off and was doing their own thing, and me and my mum ended up having a conversation. This was a couple of years ago, and I was studying graphic design at the time, so I was chatting to mum about various projects that I was working on, and all my projects tend to be quite conceptual and they're quite thought-based, and I'm really picking things apart and dissecting them and trying to figure out what I'm going to do next, right? And we get into this area of conversation and approaches to creativity, I guess. And a theme came up that has come up a lot throughout my life, which is my mum, I don't want to misquote her, so I'm not going to quote her, but the gist was essentially just let go, just have fun with it. You don't need to know exactly what you're doing. You can just ease into it and to just play. And when we started getting this area, I had a lot of, I guess, emotional stuff coming up because it really mirrored a lot of conversations that I've had throughout my life, which is, being at parties and being told that I'm too uptight or feeling left out of social situations because I don't feel like I understand how to to just get pissed and not care about things and not think about consequence and just go totally in the moment with whatever. And to a certain degree, feeling the frustration from other people, like friends, and in this case, my mum, about, can't you just let go? You just loosen up or whatever. So I got, upon being in this conversation and hearing that gist, and obviously having some thread that I thought I saw with a lot of other conversations I had, I got quite upset and I ended up crying about it, because I guess it's been a theme in my life, and I think it's quite painful to have something like this where it's not a problem that you can solve by its nature, you know. And that was the insight that I had as I've grown up and become more at ease with myself, is it's letting go is not something that you do. It's not an action. It's grace. It's something that happens. And I think a lot of my life and a lot of the way that I am is figuring stuff out and trying to work out a formula for things. And this just isn't one of those things. But as I've grown up, and particularly in the last couple of years where I feel like I've transitioned into being an adult, becoming more at ease with the way that I am and the fact that I am quite a considered person, that ease around myself has ironically led to feeling like I have to control less, feeling like I can put things down more. And just, it's funny how it goes that way. I think my tendency to figure stuff out meant that when I was growing up, I found it very frustrating that I couldn't figure this thing out, that I couldn't do the letting go thing. Yeah, but that feels like less of a problem now.
Yeah, I think accepting that can make it easier to just let go anyway. So with that situation of me in the park as a kid getting really angry and being scared by those feelings of anger that rose up and made me lash out, I realized that part of what that created was a lack of trust. If you feel like you need to watch yourself, if you feel like if I don't control myself, then I'm going to do something bad. I think that feeling can end up getting worse, because once you say, okay, I don't trust myself to do this, or I can't trust myself to just completely relax because I might do something like get super angry. If I've got, say, a video that I'm creating, at the start, I don't know really how it's going to manifest or how it's going to end up, especially when I was at one point doing a video every day. I didn't even know at the start what I was going to film. But after a few times, I just trusted in the process, because I'd already filmed a video a day for a week or so. I always trusted that if I do this and I commit to making a video tomorrow, then I'll end up making a video tomorrow and I'll think of something. And that is where the trust and the faith comes along, of just being like, I'm going to commit to this process and I trust that good things will come of it. There's this thing called pure OCD. From what I understand, it's like compulsive thoughts. It's a very common thing that a lot of people have, but don't discuss it at all. So people start to think that they're probably the only person who does this. I remember I was talking with my friend. We started just saying all like the random things that we'd thought of to do, that horrible things that we'd never actually do. But there's this fascination with what would happen if I just did something that's completely unacceptable. I remember him talking about a thing where he was with this older lady, I think, and she was really sweet. And he was just imagining what would happen if I just picked up this cup of coffee and just threw it in her face. Yeah. And it's such a horrible, he's a really nice guy. Yeah. I know he wouldn't do something like that. And he didn't actually want to, but it was just a fascination with what would happen when they're up on something very high, that you might have the thought, what if I just jumped? What would that be like? Even though that's not anything that you're entertaining at all in your normal mind, it's just part of you coming up with this. What if I did this crazy thing that makes absolutely no sense to do? And I was really interested in this after the conversation I had with my mate. So I researched a little bit about it, and it seemed a big root of this is lack of trust in yourself. That seemed to be from psychologists who studied this, that the fact that you don't trust yourself can manifest in those thoughts because you feel like that's something that you would be capable of or that you could do. I remember it saying, don't worry if you have things like this, because people don't act out those things. People don't actually act out those things ever. So it's not like you're close to doing any of those things. It's just that there's a part of you that doesn't trust that you're not a bad person in that way, feeling that you need to control yourself. If you don't control yourself, you're going to do something horrible, when that's probably not the case. If you weren't controlling yourself, you'd still be nice to your mum and do all the same things you normally do.
Yeah, it's really nice to bring that up, and this having faith in yourself. It makes sense in regards to growing up. You've got a lot more evidence to suggest that you're not going to just do something terrible if you're not regulating your behavior all the time, that you can have more faith. I'm not deeply fucked up and I'm going to do something horrible. If I let that control go, I can trust that actually all the evidence suggests that it will only be good, because obviously there are a lot of people who feel that their lives are out of control and that they are out of control and that they really struggle to regulate their behavior and they act very impulsively all the time. And that's one extreme. And then the other extreme is being just so regulated with what you do and need to know exactly what's going to go on all the time. And I definitely feel like I'm more at that end, not in the extreme, but I'm definitely more in that end. I do have more faith now. I think that I just will act in positive ways when I can just put down that need to know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I was interested in picking up what you were talking. You briefly mentioned your expression through jiu-jitsu. I was interested in hearing a bit more about that.
Yes. So it's something that I've been doing now for about 4 or 5 years, and it's been a really good way to express that part of myself, because it's natural to have a level of aggression. And I think it's good to find healthy ways to express that. And it's a way to express it in an environment where there's lots of love and it's just a fun activity that I'm learning. But it's also, we get to spar a lot in it. That's what I really enjoy about jiu-jitsu, because it's more like wrestling or judo. It's a form of grappling. So you don't do striking. There's no punches or kicks or anything like that. And what that means is you can go pretty much 100% without a high risk of injuring each other. When you're fighting and doing jiu-jitsu, you are trying to choke out the other person. They're trying to choke you out. There's lots of times where you'll be almost just about to pass out and then you have to tap, or then you escape, and it can be pretty intense, but it's something that I really value. I used to fight with my brother and stuff, so I'm quite active because I grew up having that, and I feel like it's a side of me that needs to be expressed, and that is a very healthy way for me to express it. I'm glad that I found it, and I would definitely recommend it to, well, I recommend it to pretty much anyone for any reason. If there are parts of yourself that can end up causing trouble in your life, then it's good to see, okay, is there a more healthy way that I can express this emotion or this feeling? And for a lot of people, working out or training a martial art is a great way to do that.
Yeah, it's a way that you found to release a bit of that pressure. I don't know if you'd agree that you'd be more in that end of the more controlled end. I'd probably say that you are. Yeah,
definitely.
It's funny that I think we both found these confines that we can allow that side of ourselves to be expressed. You've got your time at jiu-jitsu where this is the time when this side of me comes out. And it's just quite funny that as quite controlled people, we find a way of setting these parameters to allow that to be expressed. I wrote down a few ways that I've found that it's a really funny thing. The amount of times that I've had people be completely shocked that I drink. I had it at uni like a year and a half ago. I was at a design event and I had a pint, and someone from my year, their jaw just dropped. They were completely baffled that I drank. I think I just give off vibes that I'm completely straight edge and I don't drink at all. I think that's quite a positive thing, because I think I'm so the type to not drink that I think it's actually quite good that I still do on one level. I could imagine myself not drinking permanently at some point. But I think as it's an interesting expression for me, because as with a lot of people, inhibitions go a bit. It gives me periods of not exactly knowing what I'm going to do, which I think is quite healthy for me, actually. And I don't drink excessively, but I can surprise myself when I'm drinking. And I think actually that's probably quite a good thing, really, for the time being. It's quite a funny one with the people being so surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whichever side you're on, wherever your natural way of being is, I think it's really important to try the complete opposite side of being. Just because then you can find out where you actually are.
And for you, how do you feel you've experimented with that in the past, or how are you doing that now?
I mean, just from going out and clubbing in my teenage years, especially, of just dancing and having fun and getting better at just relaxing in that environment and expressing myself like that. Yeah. I was thinking as well, actually, about New Year's Eve and how, well, there's the quote from Peep Show. It's a truth self-evident that no one can have a good time on New Year's Eve because there's so much pressure.
Yeah.
We've spent maybe every New Year's together since we've met each other, apart from one or two.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And I can see how much our New Year's have evolved over time, because we used to really have that control. Where are we going to go? What's going to happen then? Whose house are we going to first? And then which bar are we going to? And then which club? When do we need to get there by? All of this to try and control the night and make it the best possible night. Whereas as we've got older, we've learned more to just trust the process in the same way, and just trust that if you're with the right people, you're going to have a fun night, and you don't need to plan the next place. You just need to enjoy where you are. And then when people collectively feel like moving somewhere else, go somewhere else when you feel like it. And that is the same process of letting go and being like, I'm going to trust and have faith in either myself or New Year's Eve or art or whatever it is, and have faith in it and trust that it's going to be worth your time and it's going to be good when you just let it happen.
I feel that's quite a good place to end it. What do you think?
Awesome. I'm happy with that. That was great. So the quote for next week. Oh, actually, just before we go on to the quote, we'd just like to say thank you for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed. We've really appreciated having so much support and so many people. I don't know about you, but there's definitely been more people watching than I was expecting. I was expecting each video to still be getting 2 or 3 views at this stage. I'm so happy to know people are listening.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And the feedback's been really, really kind as well. Just hearing back what you're thinking and what you're appreciating and how we can improve and stuff is just, you know, I was saying to George quite early on that it's actually great to hear constructive criticism and feedback too, because I feel like that means that you're showing enough respect to the, you're not just saying, oh, it's just great, it's all just great, to actually just get someone saying, this is how I think I'd really appreciate it, and how it could be improved. I think that's, for me, that gives me a lot of faith that it's being taken seriously, which is really nice.
Yeah. We've had so much feedback, and it's definitely improved our episodes already.
Yeah,
it's definitely helped. And yeah, if you guys did enjoy this episode, and if you enjoy any of the episodes, we'd really appreciate it if you would send it to anyone else you think would like it. We're not spending money to like promote the podcast or part of any network or anything. We really want it to just grow through people who enjoy it. Think of a quote and be like, this reminds me of so-and-so, or like, I know who would like this quote. If you think of anyone on this episode or any of the others, then we'd really appreciate it if you would share the love. And we've got a link to Ko-fi or Coffee. I always say Ko-fi, but it's a website that you can donate us a coffee or two if you fancy it. They don't take any fees. We just appreciate all the feedback and the sharing it with other people, and just the fact that you're listening and enjoying it still. Yeah. So yeah, thanks. So the quote for next week is from David Allen. He's the author of a book called Getting Things Done, which is a productivity system that I've tried completely at some points, but I've kind of adapted it a little bit. But I essentially use a lot of the stuff that he's taught, and it's had a big impact on my life. So the quote is, "Your mind is for having ideas, not holding them." There we go.
Cool.
So thanks for watching. Thanks for everything. We'll see you next week. Have a good ponder.
See you next week.
Peace.